Book 2 Section 37. It took a tattooed boy from Maidenhead to really open her eyes, Graham, and that was how he told me. I know Dave had very little love for Benny, but you would think that he would have had some compassion for the fact that we had spent the last 2 decades together. That said, I hardly gave anyone any reason to think that the news of his death would particularly upset me. However, the fact that Dave told me with all the heart of someone telling me that in the end he had been unable to fix my lawnmower somehow felt wrong. I put the phone down and looked at the sea that licked the shores outside my new apartment. I waited for the news to sink in. I waited for a feeling, some kind of emotion inside of me that signified grief for the loss of a lifelong friend, but there was nothing. At first, I didn't know whether to feel bad or not for not feeling anything. Our friendship had been in decline since the late 90s. I can't remember the last time we had any fun together, or I was pleased to see him. Anyway, wasn't it me who pleaded with Charlie for clemency? Wasn't it me who risked my reputation, and then for what? So that he could admit on television that he and Fat Charlie and the rest of us were up to our necks in it. So that he could burn down Fat Charlie's expensive holiday home. Not only that, but he goes about his work making more enemies than friends. The happy-go-lucky king of fashion that sold with ease on the streets of Luton is no more. He antagonizes everyone. I suppose I had better get used to describing him in the past simple, and no one has much affection for the fellow. Everyone likes a clown, despite the fuck-ups, see Zippy, but no one likes a miserable, egotistical ass who fucks everything up. After this analysis, I feel even less for Benny's passing, though I have realized that there is something that I cannot face right now, the other two. Not that I'm against New Order splinter groups, I refer to Zippy and Gore. I feel nothing, but I cannot be expected to grieve for them. I do not have that capacity, and I cannot be there faking mourning when in my heart of hearts I would love to cry out good riddance. I phoned Dave again and told him I needed a few days. He told me not to worry but not to lose touch. I said I wasn't going far. God bless old chestnuts like needing to get my head together. Everyone has to accept that. It's the law. I just wanted away, let the dust settle. My remaining friends would have to cope with this tragic loss on their own. Jotting down Fat Charlie's mobile number and, reluctantly, that of Dave, I thought it best to switch off my phone. I had to move quickly. As soon as they find out they will phone. When I don't answer, they will appear. I have no time to pack. I will stop off somewhere on the way and purchase everything I need for my break. What I do need is a destination. I closed my eyes and using the power of the random pen, chose somewhere to spend the next 3 days or so. The first couple of attempts proved to be on the top of a mountain or in a forest. I would at least need somewhere with a hotel of some quality, plus I didn't want to drive along anywhere too ghastly. Remembering the need to calculate the hurry-up coefficient, I moved to the nearest place that looks acceptable on the map and let Mr. Google do the rest. I find a place called Dubrig, which is less than 100 kilometers along the MA 557 which I can pick up at Estepona. It doesn't look like tough driving, though my skills are often tested in car parks and the like. The Hotel Fentasilla Rural sounded as good as anywhere. It didn't seem like much fun, but then again I didn't want any. I jumped in the car and struggled to get it out of the parking space, something that tends to occupy a great part of my day. More often than not I leave the beast in its lair and take a taxi. After a decent bit of cursing I finally get the vehicle to the exit, though I have amusingly left the strange plastic key thing in the flat, much to the hilarity of the 2 vehicles that have formed a mini-queue behind me. I give them one of those smiles that tries to explain everything, but they still considered me a fool. I return to the flat as quickly as possible and try to locate the key, which has entered a black hole in the flat. I eventually find the thing, though I am not looking forward to seeing my fellow motorists again. I just hope they know of the reputation of the people whose employ I am in. It appears they don't, as my parentage is questioned. I have no time for this, so try to drive away as quickly as possible, causing the thing to stall, which initiates the klaxon orchestra's 3rd movement in B major. I make a mental note to have their families assassinated and their villages torched the moment I come back and am off, thankfully, after far too much huffing and puffing. Despite saying I wouldn't, I leave my mobile on, but on silent. Just to see if they left a message or something, a kind of morose sensation as to how they would react to the news. My friends probably wouldn't get the news until late on today, or even tomorrow. Maybe they would never know the truth. All I was told was that Benny had been given a type of celestial P45. I would no doubt have to be back in Marbella on Saturday for lunch, so by then I hope all the dust would have settled. I can fake any emotion once they have had enough time to get their heads round it. I stop off at the Canada shopping centre on the outskirts of Marbella, not because it was on my way, rather that it is the easiest one to park in, and after the subterranean experience at home, I would like things to be as easy as possible from now on. Once inside the shopping centre, I was overtaken by my shocking level of nerdiness. It had escaped my mind that I was supposed to be performing some form of grief ceremony for my recently departed friend, but I was more interested in the offers on toothpaste. I kept the mobile with me but knew that even on a school day, the chances of a call from Zippy before 10 in the morning would be improbable. I bought some clothes and toiletries and was soon on the road again, trying to force a feeling by listening to some of the shite music that Benny used to listen to, but still nothing manages to make me feel anything. In fact, it is worse than that. I begin to consider the possibility that Benny may have done the rest of us a favor. Zippy can be saved, people like him, and maybe it will be his wake-up call. God knows, he needs it. I must not keep saying God knows and God willing, as I don't believe, despite my mother's concern. I eventually find the Mar 557 and begin to wind my way up the mountain pass. I consider turning back and finding somewhere up the coast, but something tells me to drive on to Jubrick. I am somehow taken with the name. The person I don't believe in knows why, so onwards I go up the windy, vomit-inducing hills. Of course it looked like simple driving on a map that I couldn't read and showed only the most basic of information. After nearly an hour's driving, I appeared to be equidistantly far from my chosen destination. Finally, I found a turn-off that led me up another hill. I felt for a moment that the town planners around here had been tricked with a bag of beans in the past, as the low-lying cloud became the newest of my many concerns. It was nearly 11 o'clock in the morning when I arrived in the village. Luckily there wasn't much there to test my rather shaky orienteering skills. If this indeed was a one-horse town, I had arrived on a day that it was moonlighting down the hill. However, the place looked just what I needed for a few days. I had almost accepted that I wouldn't lie to myself anymore. I wouldn't find solace in my pain for Benny here. He was dead and it was his fault. My motivation was not to make the same mistake, something I didn't fear would happen. Benny effectively committed suicide, only that another person actually ended his life. I parked up in a space for 2 cars in such a way that would anger another driver later on, took out my scant possessions, and crossed the road to the hotel. At 11 and a bit am, my stomach was suggesting that breakfast should be entertained forthwith, though I assumed that checking in would be the work of a mere moment. With a smile on my face, I made my way to the reception desk. I gave the delightful-looking young thing my information, expecting confirmation from the internet booking service. She looked at my reservation number, and then at me, then at the computer, then at me again. My knowledge of the hotel game told me that the number of keys that were in their cubby holes meant that the hotel was not full, so should the World Wide Web fail to book me a place, I felt confident of striking a deal in a more conventional way. Unless, of course, the Swedish ladies' volleyball team were arriving any moment now. That would be rather disappointing. I was slightly worried about my mirth considering the recent passing of a friend, but that was just the way things were. I felt certain that my jolly state would not last long, as there did seem to be more than one problem to iron out. We started with the fact that the computer did not admit the reservation number. I suggested her worrying was curtailed as we could start afresh with the new reservation. She informed me that this was impossible, as the system recognized the reservation and it couldn't be deactivated. This was the first time I had heard such a sentence, and cared not for its repetition. She called a colleague at a travel agent's, and between the pair of them they quickly managed to get no closer to my room. Luckily, after a few minutes we managed to cancel my original reservation and start again. It was going to cost me extra for this. My caring levels were now very low. I just wanted to get my things in my room and, well, after that I didn't know what I was going to do. We began again with the reservation. I was actually using my own ID for this one, as there was no illegal activity involved, a rare experience in previous times, though I felt confident that I would not kill anyone during this stay. After 20 minutes of throwing and not much twing, my reservation was made. I asked her what room it was and she told me the number. Then, she told me some more things. I couldn't go to my room until it had been cleaned, despite the fact that it had been vacant the previous eve. I asked her how many guests they had had the previous night, and she admitted that the hotel had been empty. I asked her how many cleaners they had. She furnished me with the information that their number was 2. I inquired, tacitly, or so I thought, that if there were two cleaners that had begun their cleaning duties 2 hours since, it would be fair to suppose that one of their tasks may have already been completed and there would be a habitable room available for me. This request was treated with almost disbelief by the receptionist, as the rules did not permit such a thing. My room could not be occupied before noon, and that was the case. I was welcome to wait in the bar, but that would not be open till 12, although I technically couldn't either, as I wasn't really a guest until 12. I asked her if she could look after my bag, but she reminded me that I wasn't technically a guest. Smiling still, I suggested she wasn't much of a receptionist and returned to the opener, informing her that I would be back. I put my things in the boot and began to seek out a solution to the problem of breakfast. There was a cafeteria across the square which appeared to be open. Activity was minimal in the village. Summer was reaching its end and most people probably had little desire to be here. I don't know why, it all seemed very nice and postcardy to me. Across the road was a cafeteria that looked about as good as anything I would find around here, and I decided that the world would fall into place with a coffee and a light inside me, and, should the gods carry favor with me, a bit of toast. Entering through those strange metal door curtains, I am sure neither language has a word for them, a set of hanging metal beads that perhaps would prevent a very weak drunk from entering, but for the rest of us there is just fear of the loss of an eye. The curtains indicate really that you are not in a city, that people will observe you like a little green fella who has just double-parked his spaceship in front of the town hall and asked for a bevy of local virgins to be sent to your slaughter chamber. Thankfully, the place is empty. I remember a film I saw as a child that was about a neutron bomb that killed everyone in the city but left the buildings intact. That was how the town appeared. I gave a shout of good morning and took a seat. I had picked up a book in Malaga, a collection of short stories by the same chap who wrote that Secrets thing that was not up to much, but I like to give people a second chance. Take Benny, for example. I remember that he is dead, and I remember that I still can't see any negatives. There are noises coming from the kitchen, so I assume I shall be attended to in a matter of hours. I leave it another 5 minutes and give out a shout of Oiga, which literally means here, and I find very unpleasant and rude. Still, it is one of the most effective ways of getting any attention. A female voice indicates that a moment's more waiting is required. I accept this and continue waiting. A few seconds later I hear the charmless expression "cabron de mierda." Literally, bastard of shit. This type of exclamation is generally reserved for people for whom you feel extreme hatred, and I was surprised as I had not really had time to make any enemies in this place. As I look up to see the fountain of this fury, a coffee cup comes flying towards my head, and only my ninja training permits me to sidestep this attack, and I question its validity. My parentage is questioned and the saucer follows the cup. This time I am not quick enough and it catches me just above the eyebrow. There is a feeling of intense pain, and my right eye chooses to take some time out from its seeing duties. That means I am badly posed to avoid the second cup, which catches on the forehead, and then things go black. I awake after an unknown amount of time to find a woman in her early 40s standing over me with a rolling pin. My vision is still impaired, that coupled with the knock on the head impedes me putting 2 and 2 together. She asks me what I'm doing here and how I had the audacity to try to find her. Then, the penny dropped. Julia. What? But, what? My surprise was such that that was the most articulate catechise that I could muster. What the fuck are you playing at? Hasn't enough time passed? Can't you let me get on with my life? She spoke and raised the rolling pin. I felt it best to make my explanation far beyond excellent. Don't, please. Was the best I could offer. I bought myself a moment to think. How was I here? How was she here? How weird was this? Julia, I had no idea that you were here. You must believe me. If I had known, I would never have come. I've been living in Marbella. I needed to get out of town for a while and chose a place at random with a pen on the map. I had never even heard of this place before this morning. You have to believe me. This is all random. I gave her a pleading puppy dog look just to make it all sound more real. Such is the lot of liars, the difficulty we have in making the truth sound plausible. Marbella. Bit of a step up from Luton, isn't it? So you just ended up here by chance. Well, I don't care if it's true or not. Makes no difference to me. I am surprised you didn't get yourself killed a long while ago. Anyway, it's great to see you. She smiled. Really? I responded, like a fool who sees a sign saying walk into this wall and does just that. Not at all. She maintained the smile. I see you have fostered an appreciation for sarcasm since we last met. Well, having your hopes and dreams shattered by the biggest asshole ever to walk the planet often makes you change your outlook on life. Sarcasm again? I inquire. This time it was the truth. Now the smile had gone. I suppose you could have a coffee now you are here. Don't steal anything. She went into the kitchen. My right eye was filled with blood, my head hurt like fuck. I didn't know whether it was from the blows or the re-encounter. Either way, this was quite strange indeed. Julia still looked good, her hair was still black, though maybe dyed, and she had kept her figure. I cautiously rose from my chair and made my way to the kitchen entrance with the aim of small talk. So, how have you been? Great start, Gray. I mean, you look well. As if that was going to bring it round. What do you expect to hear? That I never got over you? Years of therapy and counseling have failed to erase the mental scar you left. Well, it wasn't like that. Quite the opposite. Quite a few bottles of vodka and quite a few cocks I never asked the name of their owners soon made things all right again. Maybe you did me a favor. No one has ever hurt me since. That doesn't mean I have become a sour old witch, far from it. I have learned how to love and how to be realistic. For that reason, the coffee is on me. She pushed past me with the coffees and returned to the table. I decided to just play things by ear. If I could get out of here without another injury, I would settle for that. So, how did you end up here? Strange choice, wouldn't you say? This question was, some would say, pivotal. If she invited me to mind my own business, I might as well finish my coffee and leave. Should she answer offering some information, then maybe this could be an interesting day. It was certainly crossing my mind that us meeting in these circumstances was indeed rather strange, the kind of thing to blow the fatalist Gore's head off. She had that womanly thing with her coffee. She looked into it, swilling it round, as if she were waiting for the coffee to give her permission to respond. Of course, she had her answer, but was allowing me to dread the myriad of possible diatribes that could soon leave her mouth. This place chose me more than the other way around. That was a good response. She couldn't leave it there, unless this was some episodic series that would be continued in the near future. I gave her a look of genuine interest and prepared my sore head for concentrated listening. My husband is mayor of this place. That hurt more than the cup to the head. She knew what she was doing. All this was aimed to create a response. I tried to look cool, but failed. Then I had a flash of inspiration. If I was to go down, then it would be fighting. I suppose you don't wear your wedding ring to work so that it doesn't get damaged in the kitchen, etc. It was hard not to look pleased with myself. Very perceptive. She smiled and continued to play with her coffee. She excused herself for a minute. For a painter, she had a lot of Agatha Christie about her. Whilst she did something that did not appear that urgent, I waited at the table. I wanted to stay here. I was still realistic, but it would be nice to stay. After 5 minutes she returned with a bottle of brandy and 2 glasses. Pouring liberally, she took a swig, asked me for a tab and began. I have been married for 3 years, but hardly see the man. He is never here. I get this place, the hotel and other little things. It didn't start off as a marriage of convenience, of course, neither was it true love. He had his political responsibilities and his business interests. At first, he was away Monday to Friday, then it just sort of became longer. Now I am just called upon to look good on his arm when he has a function to attend. We still get on quite well, we just never coincide. He prefers younger things that can be easily distracted by his financial prowess. The situation suits me. I don't have to worry about money. I like it here. This place never has any customers, and if there are, then I have staff to deal with them. I can go up to the house in the mountains to paint. At the weekends I go off to London, Paris, Venice, Florence or Munich and wander around art galleries, and from time to time have exhibitions. I even sell the odd doodle. She looked up and poured from the bottle again. I'm sorry to hear that, was my measured response. Like fuck you are, was hers. I laughed and she poured a third brandy. I told her that I wasn't used to such swigging at this early hour. She told me to shut up and drink. That seemed like good advice. She asked me what was going on in Marbella. I told her the story since she last was seen on the streets of Luton, something which has taken the 4 of us over 300 pages to get to, but I managed to sum up in less than 2 minutes. Dear readers, how we could so easily have saved you all this time. Benny's assassination was the logical point where I left the story. She said she couldn't believe that all four of us had made it this far, though wasn't surprised that the only people that I had had a long-lasting relationship with were those I didn't like or couldn't shake off. I suggested that wasn't fair for Gore. She said the fact that I was making excuses for them still proved her point. It would be nice to write just for once. The brandy was causing my head to pound. She didn't seem too offended in my company, and I had no desire to go anywhere else. Taking a big gulp and then fighting the white-knuckle ride, I asked her what her immediate plans were. Maybe you wouldn't mind hanging out later. Where did that come from? Had I suddenly become a character from Beverly Hills 90210? I had never used that expression in my life. Was I under the impression I was cool? I tried to rectify the situation. I mean, if you have no plans, maybe I could buy you dinner. A strange itchy sweat invaded my palms and neck as I realized I had done badly. She took the bottle in her hand again and said, "Why the hell not?" That was what I would consider a good result. It was, though, just a little before 1. There was a lot of afternoon to be had, but my goal now was to get some sleep and try to get my head feeling normal again. Julia was pouring more brandy. I hadn't eaten. I had been bonked on the head with porcelain, and the fact that I was here with her was all too much for me. Julia asked me to help her with some stuff in the kitchen that didn't make any sense, but neither did any of what was happening. As I followed her into the kitchen, the pain in my head did seem to subside. She asked me if I knew how to peel prawns. I wasn't going to tell her I didn't, so I began to get busy with the fish. I peeled away happily for a couple of minutes, when then from behind I felt a pair of hands on top of mine. Within seconds and rolling between bits of peeled prawns, we reached the next level of reconciliation, and that, I imagine, is more than enough information for you. After the passion left the kitchen, there was a moment that may have invited trepidation and even led to an expulsion. Her silence was evident as she slid off the table, readjusting herself in an attempt to collect her composure. The moment lasted a lot longer than the clock on the wall seemed to suggest. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she said that she had some things to do and would see me later. I would accept that. I didn't have much choice. I found myself in the hotel, ready for a bed. Counting the parts of my body that didn't hurt, I fell into the bed and was soon wondering whether to risk entering the land of dreams. I gave way soon, remembering that I had lived in some form of dream for the majority of my life. I didn't know whether to take flowers or some other form of gift for Julia. There didn't seem to be much point in taking a bottle of wine as she had a restaurant. She always had a good nose for the grape, so I didn't want her giving me one of those looks as I handed the inadequate bottle over. She told me to turn up around 8, but I had done everything that was on offer in this town well before 7 after the noon. I wasn't sure how to react. I wasn't sure what to say, what to feel. I really wanted it to be a few hours down the line, so I would at least know whether to feel anything again. She opened the door and gave me a smile that at least suggested my early appearance did not cause her too much distress. She beckoned me in and handed me an apron. This felt more than strange. We were acting like we had been frozen in pods in a spaceship as we traveled to our new interstellar home, and she had somehow forgotten about all the dreadful things that I had done to her in the name of our relationship. I don't know why I was complaining about that. She could, of course, spend the entire evening berating me for my numerous failures, and that would be a shame as my head was now feeling a lot better. She told me to peel some carrots, all the time looking over me as I did it, not in recognition of my good work, rather in desperation for my failure to do it as she would like. I have a theory that if I studied her technique and faithfully replicated it, it would still be wrong, like when she got me to help her to clean the house, but then complained that I only made things worse with my substandard performance. All that said, as I watched her cut the ham, I realized that I had fallen in love with her, and once again. Despite the fact that she laughed at my carrots, she appeared content with my wine-opening ability. I poured her a glass and thought about giving her a kiss. By the time the thinking process suggested that it could possibly be a good idea, the moment, and the woman, had left the room. She told me to make myself at home in the living room, something which I did with ease, worryingly comfortable. I had to make myself look as uncomfortable as possible when she entered, otherwise I would have a complex upon her return. We hadn't had a conversation since the incident between the prawns earlier, and I still felt nervous. In my nervous state, the first glass of wine barely touched the sides. I didn't want to get drunk, as that would be a social faux pas. I tried not to drink, but the glass kept coming back to my mouth. I had had 3 sips, but they felt like 3 bottles. My heart beat like an overdose had been granted to me. I caught a glimpse of her in the kitchen, and realized that common sense had now left the building. I was in love. I decided the best thing was to look cool, but I couldn't get the word marzipan out of my head. For some reason it was also the most hilarious locution that I had ever heard. My attempts to contain the giggle are fruitless, as I resemble someone on a bus who has just remembered an incident of great hilarity. At least the rest of the bus can't see me. Things are under control when she returns with canapes. Despite the lack of marzipan, I burst out laughing. I am glad I decided to look cool. What's so funny? She inquired. I don't know. It just came out from nowhere. I gave her a look that begged pity. I thought maybe you had remembered Benny had been killed. She smiled and then realized that it was a rather unpleasant comment. I had forgotten all about Benny, but was smart enough to deflect the situation away from my stupidity and onto her embarrassment. There wouldn't be too many opportunities like this, so I had to make the best. I flashed her a look that I was about to give her a yellow. Maybe it was in bad taste. I apologize. It's just that. She began to trip over her words. Forget it. Let's eat. Extramarital sex tends to sharpen my appetite. We took to the table and she spoke, but I couldn't hear the words. I could hear clouds and other things that didn't normally make sounds. Every sound had its own special relevance. Whilst I thought I was being delightfully charming and doleful, she just asked me if I was tripping. As everyone knows, a large meal and wine tends to make one sleepy, so we eschewed the idea of brandy in the West Wing in favour of Randian side of things. My deepest apologies, readers. There is truly no excuse for that. I was awoken at around 7:30 by the sound of a siren. It sped past Julia's residence, and I spent a moment wondering if it belonged to an ambulance or a fire engine. I fell back on the pillow, looked at Julia and began to laugh again. She was also now awake. Hardly the most romantic gesture in the history in the complete world. Sorry. It just seemed rather comical. I am here and yet paying for a room in a hotel that you own. Made me laugh. I am delighted to see that you have spent the interim years developing your well-bred sense of humor. Do me a favor, will you? Go to the window and tell me what all the commotion is. She had a strange look on her face, so I did as she asked. In TV movie fashion, I went to the window with the sheet tied round my waist, and saw very little than smoke bellowing from what used to be the main square. I informed her of this, and she asked me to be seated. This may seem very strange. I have something to tell you, and I beg you let me tell the story without interruption, however difficult the concepts may appear to comprehend, she said. I just shrugged and prepared to listen. What was the worst that she could tell me? Of course, I didn't even think about that. Exactly 10 days ago, I went up to the house we have in the mountains to paint. I like it up there and the view is spectacular. I have painted it God knows how many times and usually just start again on the same canvas. Strangely, for the time of year, the weather turned dramatically, and so I decided to stay the night up there. Being alone in one place or another does not make much difference. At just after 10 there was a knock on the door, so I went to investigate. The front door is covered by a large metal gate, so I was fearless as I opened it. Stood there was a man in his 50s, asking if he could give me something to help him light his fire. He was staying in a house up the road and was lacking in firelighters. I gave him a couple of pine cones, a local trick, and he told me he had a message for me. I just wanted him out of my face as soon as possible, so I said really. And he continued. He said that the message was that the past would come back but it wouldn't haunt me, and that the third time truly was lucky. I thanked him for the message and went to close the door. He said that his words were true and that if I didn't believe him, then the next day I should take a look in the garden. The very last tree would be bereft leaves or fruit. With that he bade me good night and was gone. She stopped for a moment to light a cigarette, yet I knew that it wasn't my time to speak. I gestured that she continue. Despite the weird encounter, I was able to drift into a deep and fulfilling sleep. As I took coffee in the morning, I tried to avert my gaze from the garden, but soon my curiosity got the better of me. I wandered down to the garden. The morning sun felt good on my bare arms. Even though I was at nearly 1,000 meters altitude, the rays of light always fell graciously on the garden in the morning. It still remains as one of my very favorite places. However, the warmth of the morning sun soon was found lacking as I saw the tree at the end of the garden suddenly without leaves or fruit, just as the old man said. I felt nothing for a moment, expecting to feel something, but it somehow felt all right. It wasn't a problem. The rest of the trees were fine. The night storm had passed and the weather presented itself with the finest of credentials. I got in the car and came back down to the village. The incident was clearly unusual, but I didn't find it upsetting, nor did I feel the need to make sense of the old man's prophecy. Somehow, I knew that the meaning would be made clear. 2 days later, I received a letter that told me that everyone I cared about should be kept away from the hotel on the dawn of the 13th, this morning, at 7:30 in the morning, as a fire would ravage the place. The letter told me not to be concerned as the money would be necessary for the future. Then you walked into the bar and everything fell into place. Normally, without the benefit of the visit from the old man, you would have considered being hit on the head with a cup as the highlight of the agonizing violence I was about to inflict on you. However, despite the Twin Peaks storyline, I wanted to know what was going on. Still, I had to make you bleed, just a little. I didn't want to give anything away. You were the only guest in the hotel, so I gave the staff the night off. There are a couple of the staff who get on my nerves, but not enough to wish on them cremation. It wasn't hard to get you out of the place. Now you are here, the hotel is on fire, and this is quite curious, if you will allow me to dabble with understatement. She extinguished her cigarette and looked at me. Gosh, I simply said. Swearing somehow felt wrong. What are we going to do about it? I hoped she had some answers, as I didn't. First, I need to get some more sleep. They will come knocking for me quite soon and there will be an amount of paperwork which will make my already repentant head, for the wine, don't get paranoid, worse. I made a plan the other day, just in case all this come true. So, give me a kiss and go back to sleep. I gave her the kiss but sleep was not becoming. She was off in no time in the land of Nod. I didn't know whether to be pleased or not. I liked the idea that my irresistible charms had won her back. That didn't seem too plausible in terms of life on planet Earth. Now that some mystical intervention was the reason behind her change of heart, I didn't like the idea as much. Then, looking at her as she slept, and considering what I had in Marbella, sometimes you had to accept help from other sources. I lay next to her and started making plans. Whether it was my innate fear of the future or the delight of a dream coming true, I soon found myself in the same land as her. The bell went a bit after 9. She gave me a kiss and told me she would be back with the most haste possible. I barely meddled with consciousness, failing to hear her close the door. The next time I awoke it was with a feeling of genuine, unpleasant pain. My left leg had moved out from beneath the sheet and had managed to lodge itself directly into the rays of sunlight that were penetrating the room. They must have had a good hour or so to work on my foot and leg as the skin was warm and very tender. I dived into the shower, allowing the cold water to ease the pain somewhat. Then I realized that my clothes had been burned to a cinder. I sat with a towel on and wandered into the kitchen to make some coffee. Julia returned soon after. She looked tired. She took my coffee and sat at the table. Electrical failure. Bad fortune. An act of God. That's what the police said. That means that the insurance will pay out. What happens now? She asked under the impression that I would know the answer. Space was my response, hardly worth the inverted commas. If she expected something from me, she was due for some more disappointment. She realized to take the bait. My husband will give me a divorce. He won't like it, but if he gets funny I'll say I'll go to the press. He might actually make more money from a scandal, but his political reputation would be damaged, and somehow, he has managed to keep it impeccable, despite corruption. I imagine it will be rather more difficult for you to hand your notice in. Could be tricky. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. You are sure about this? Not at all. She responded. More sarcasm. I inquired. If it were sarcasm, you probably wouldn't need to ask if it was sarcasm. She smiled and we went to the sofa. Here is the plan. I've had a good think about it. I think this is the way forward. How much money do you have? Lie to me and I will have your genitalia in the stew. About 200 grand. Plus, a flat. I can get my hands on another one, but that would be a misappropriation. I'm not a stranger to such acts. A potential $750,000, more realistically half. And you? The hotel is insured for about $500,000 and I have some other stuff. I imagine there would be a payoff, but all that could take time. I think we should move as soon as possible. Can you get out in 2 weeks? Better to be as soon as possible. Whatever happens it could get ugly. My employers are not nice people. I could try and have a word, but maybe it is just best to disappear, far, far away. 2 weeks sounds almost too long. Where? She looked around the room, as if she were searching for inspiration. The dreadful abomination to broadcasting from across the pond known as Fox News was on at the time, and, not surprisingly, fair, objective journalism had been ditched in favor of the weather. As the meteorological information told us of the current climate in Southeast Asia, she looked at me and shouted Okinawa. I saw no reason to disagree. Okay, we need to move fast. There is no way that we can speak to each other directly. I imagine that the fire has removed all evidence of your visit to this town. Here is how we shall keep in contact. Join this online dating page. She handed me the address of a web page. Use this nick, only contact me on mine. Always use a cyber cafe and never the same one. We will speak every 3 days from 8 to 9 at night. If for some reason one of us can't make it, then we will just leave a message. There can be no other contact between us. The next time we see each other will be in the airport. Well, the next time will be in my bedroom, in 3 minutes. Then you must go back to Marbella, make things seem as normal as possible. Do what you have to do, don't get caught. Then, well then, I don't know. Will they come after you? She inquired. They might. I had to tell her. Might not have too many shags left then, best take advantage. She winked at me. With that we were horizontal again, but it didn't seem too long before I was back on the kickin' of hell and wondering how to elude the clutches of Fat Charlie after leaving his organization, murdering one of his colleagues and robbing one of his flats. This would take some organizing, or some luck. I remembered Julia, I had used up all my luck. It would have to be organization. End of book 2.